You're doing some other things internationally that I'd like you to, Brian, if you would. Obviously, you have an international team in this room. How are you selling healthcare at Baptist System internationally?
Internationally.
What are you doing? What are you doing, and particularly the quality?
Okay, I'm going to stumble through it because I got all the experts over here. We got our own people there. But essentially, we started out on a very small, on a small scale. Now we've got a budget of $5 million, $7 million. We got 65 people. Usually people find out about what we're doing in healthcare. Well, Wicked Baptists are doing it, and look how successful they are. We'll go out and hire a director, we'll hire an assistant director and a secretary, we'll be in it. And I said, what do you do the other 20 hours of the week? Because you have to cover it 24/7. So we have a very, very robust program. And our plan is very simple. Half it's retail and half it's sort of medically focused, where we'll bring a team of physicians down to Latin America. We bring all the technology with us. We bring IT people with us. We bring physicians, and we use interactive technology where you can use telemedicine and you can interact with people in surgery, like Dr. Quesada's here. We've done that many, many times, where you can do, in one of the operating rooms, be talking to surgeons in Buenos Aires or something like that, and they can actually be talking to the surgeon who's working over at the Baptist campus over there. So it's really high tech, and the doctors love it. And the connection there is, so when they have somebody that's really sick, they're going to send them up north to our organization. The other thing, Alan actually started with Alan Brennison, our corporate VP, started the First Ladies, what's it called, Alan? The
First Ladies Women's Health.
First Ladies Women's Health. And essentially we went to the president's wife, not the president, but the president's wife, and we said, we'd like to meet 500 of your best friends. And we rent the finest hotel in the city, and we invite 500 of the First Lady's best, usually wealthy friends, and we bring some of our doctors in, and we let the First Lady design the program in terms of, do you want to have something on breast surgery, plastic surgery, cancer, what have you. We put together a half-day program, make it very, very nice, very upscale, and it's amazing the connections there. You have a couple of people that come up, they go back and they tell the rest of the neighbors, wow, you should hear it, you should see the experience. I've been to the Mayo Clinic, cold, nobody speaks Spanish, da, 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 da. You go to Baptist, they pick me up at the airport, they drive me over there, they arrange for my children, my family to stay there. It's one-stop shopping, and it takes a very significant amount of resource to do it, but you got to do it right, and when you do it right, you hit the nail on the head. So that's essentially how we do it, and we do many, many other things, but essentially it's retail, and it's focused on the specialty referrals that will be coming northward.
I see some folks standing in the back. There are seats up in front. The front row is open. All of you are standing up in the back. There are chairs. If you like to stand, you can stay standing. Frank, you have an international sales component too in Talbert. Talk about that.
Well, we do. We have a very targeted program. Unlike Billy and perhaps Baptist, not everybody is a potential client. We have to look at those folks that have the potential to locate, and there's some synergy here. And we are very careful on where we target and where we go. Europe clearly has been a targeted market for us. If you look at the number of multinational corporations that have set up operation here in the last decade, bulk of them have come from Europe. 10 years ago, there was less than 200 multinational corporations here. There's over 1,200 in Miami-Dade County today. Where do they come from? Well, the number one player that we have focused on is Spain. I mean, literally, we started knocking on doors in Spain almost 10 years ago. And we started with the banks, and you've all been reporting and seeing what's happening with the Spanish banks here. But our targeted markets are Spain, in Europe, Spain, France, Germany, and Italy. And quite frankly, those are the area that we're getting most of our activity from. But now we also see Canada. With the parity and the dollar being closer, we're seeing lots of activity from Canada. Brazil. Used to be, of course, that we sell Miami as a platform for multinational corporations, particularly Europe, as the platform in which to do business with Latin America and the Caribbean, and to some extent the United States. We're seeing somewhat of a reverse, particularly from Brazil, where they're using Miami-Dade as a platform to access the US market. So that's sort of a new trend, but we're starting to see it. And much like Billy talked about, the most recent phenomena is China. For the last couple of years, we had lots of delegations coming through here. kicking the tires, not saying too much, you know, asking certain questions, coming in and leaving, coming in and leaving. But now we're actually getting projects, some of them fairly significant that we're working on. And it's, again, they see that Miami, and they're looking at the European model, is perhaps that platform in which to do business between here and Latin America, as opposed to maybe locating that actually in Latin America. So we look at these numbers every year, but clearly what gives us the ability to compete there is the airport and the seaport. Because without that lift, without that access, we wouldn't be able to do it.
We've heard a lot of very good things, but we all know there's some problems out there. Mark, if we're going to be selling quality as a community, either in education or throughout the community, what do we have to fix? What do we have to improve, and how can we do it? I know you can't give details, but what are the areas you want to look at? You don't want to be. If he gives details, we're here till next Christmas, and he's not done yet.
I mean, in the first instance, I think we all recognize that image is very, very important, and my perspective is driven in part by having been away for 3 years and coming back. First of all, let's just talk about at the state level. You can't see from Tallahassee all the way to Miami. And what I mean by that is that the South Florida presence is not as strong as it needs to be. We have excellent legislators who are very effective, but we seem not to be able to have the leverage that we deserve from a financial perspective and that we deserve from a demographic perspective. And we've been getting better, but I think we need more concertation as it relates to the critical issues that affect public policy out of Tallahassee related to South Florida. So that's in the political domain. And part of that is a function of the fact that we tend to allow ourselves to be caricaturized. And those caricatures are usually stereotypical and far from the truth. So I think that's why the issue of promotion and marketing is important. And in that, telling the story about our success. And the success derives from the strength of a small and medium-sized enterprise. The success derives from the immigrant experience. The success derives from who we are, as opposed to dreaming about who we'll be. And I think we could emphasize that more as well, Michael. Thirdly, and obviously the issue of education. And the issue of education, particularly at the K through 12 level, truth of the matter is there's a lot of success stories in our Dade County public schools. They're not being told. And under the circumstances, given our demographics, they're even more remarkable. So I think we have to do a better job there. But at the same time, the business community needs to take more responsibility for not accepting mediocrity. And when the public sector in Florida, generally speaking, is driven into mediocrity, in part, or is allowed to be driven into mediocrity because of the low expectations of the business community, which I said earlier, and I'll repeat it. Having lived here for 30 years, I've continued to be amazed at how low the expectations are of the business community for our education system. And so I think that there does need to be an awakening of business leadership here about what's really at stake. And what's really at stake, Michael, given our demographics, is that our demographics, without a concerted, long-term, aligned investment, are going to make it more and more difficult for us to talk about the quality that we know is so important. So I think image is very important. I think having a much more unified leadership, and then particularly focusing on education. By the way, K through 12 is critical here because the universities, the public institutions, whether it's Miami-Dade or FIU, are only as good as the students who come through the basic system. And so I think the superintendent's been doing a great job the last couple of years at focusing his efforts. But it's going to take all of us, not just some of us, in that regard.
Bill, what do you see that you need?
Well, I mean, as a 40-year resident and have raised a family here, I mean, you've got this expectation of quality, but the resources aren't coming. They're going down. So if you want to have this goal of this global community and this world-class community, that comes with a price, but the resources are drying up. Money for education, money for infrastructure. That's the most troubling thing I see ahead. We're going to be this global community, but the dollars seem to be shrinking away. Now we're all doing more with less, and we cut our budget. But at some point, you pass the line when I'm sorry, we can't do it anymore. You want us to be this, but we don't have the money to do it anymore. And I hope we're not that close to that. But I see that as the overall community challenge, but it's probably not here. You see what's happening in California. Their university system seems to be kind of withering away. That's not what a country does. My God. And you look at what's happening around the world, and there are countries with challenges, but luxury and quality has a price.
Mike, I just want to note for the record that I didn't mention directly the issue of resources. I'm glad that Billy did, but I didn't. And part of the reason is because I recognize that particularly those public institutions have a responsibility to demonstrate efficiency and accountability, which I know that we can do. But I think that it's really, if the resources would flow, if we had a general, more broader understanding and consensus and alignment around what's important and how difficult it's going to be to get there.
Ryan, what do you see as the gap?
I want to talk about the cab drivers in my opinion. They're going to be the worst. I really want to talk about education in the sense that even though we've got a little bit of a reprieve right now, we have a global shortage of nurses, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, and it's going to be a huge, huge problem. And we've been working this for a couple of years, and we were actually to the point where our board suggested us we ought to open up or buy a nursing school, and we talked with our chief nursing executives, and we said, the better thing to do is probably partner with the people. They don't have the resources, and there's all sorts of problems that they have. And it's not the fact they don't have students. They have more students than China has right. You can't imagine the waiting list for the nursing schools. They don't have the resources in the schools in the space, nor do they have the professors. And one of the problems is that the nurses out there get paid a lot more than professors. And there's all sorts of political reasons for that. So what we end up doing is we partner with FIU in Miami-Dade and Barry and the others, and we end up hiring the professors, and we turn them over to the schools and everything. So this last year, we hired, we trained about 400 nurses on a full scholarship. Great position to be in. And we did that because we couldn't push people to open up the classrooms, but we could certainly partner with them, and that takes resources. And that resources on our behalf are several millions of dollars. We thought that was a great investment because we know if we don't solve that, we're going to have a real serious problem down the road. And the next question is, well, we did it, but they're going to go elsewhere. Well, we think that if we treat the people really well and we have a great world-class place to train nurses, they're going to stay at our place. So this is the best retention we ever had. So that's how we've been able to deal with it, because we were waiting there and waiting there and waiting there, and sort of fell on deaf ears. And the partnership thing really worked out quite well.
Frank, what do you need?
Well, I think that it's interesting because I think there's a common theme message. One of our charges is to create and also to recruit knowledge-based industries. But you can't have the knowledge-based industries without the knowledge. And it goes back to education and creating, retaining, and recruiting talent. There's no question that the cities of the future that are going to be successful are those that have talent. And all you have to do is look at the demographics. I know we have a high unemployment rate and all of that, so there's some talent around and available. But if I look at my brethren here on the panel, it ain't going to be too long before we're all retired. And the number of people who are behind us are substantially less in numbers than we are. We're the baby boomer generation sort of plus. So if you just look at the numbers, the companies of the future are going to go where the talent of the future is. And so we have to recruit, retain, and create talent. And that means in this community, not only knowledge-based industries, but it also means a bilingual, trilingual workforce, not bi or tri-illiterate. And we have some problems where we have folks that are illiterate in all 3 languages. And that ain't gonna work, quite frankly. And you know, one of the challenges we have, a company comes in, they go, oh, well, you know, I'm going to Miami, everybody speaks Spanish, I'll bring this company in, it'll be great, and I'll be able to hire, my top professionals and they'll speak Spanish. Not so much. So next thing you know, they're recruiting them from Colombia and Chile and all over because they can't find the business Spanish that they need. So we need to do that, K through 12, we've talked about, I don't need to amplify that. The second area I think clearly is transportation. All of you, I'm sure, had quality entertainment getting here tonight, right? It was so easy, you got here real quick, you weren't late. Michael said, so why do you deal with that? I said, you know, Michael, it's usually one of the first questions we're asked by location consultants. What's the average length of commute from point A to point B? Even when I lie, it's bad. So if we don't fix it, they ain't coming. Because they're not going to have and waste productivity of having people commute 3 hours a day to get to work. Ain't going to happen. So it's got to be mass transit. We've got to look at all of that because it's coming. And we're almost at that point of density where we're going to need to do it. It's going to cost a lot of money, but quite frankly, if we're going to succeed, we're going to have to deal with it. And the third, I think, is a critical problem that we still don't have a lot of answers for. But we need to solve it, or at least get better, and that's economic disparity in this community. We have a widening gap of economic prosperity, and particularly in our urban areas. We need to be able to address the fact that there are many parts of this community where the unemployment rate isn't 10%, it's 25 or 30%. Where you have people that are structurally unemployed, and even when it gets better, they ain't getting a job. So we have seen investment throughout this community, but isn't it interesting that we still today have places in this community that have not had the kind of investment, not the kind of benefit that the other areas of the community have. It's been a difficult problem, but other communities have done better at solving it, and we need to do that as well.
You've laid out some really good things about this community and some things that we can sell and some gaps we have. I have one final question. I want to leave some time for the audience to ask questions, but I have one final question for this panel, and I want to start with Mark. Mark, we've got now a sort of an agenda here that you all have set up here in front. You talked about what quality we have to sell. Not all of it, but some of it. We've got an outline of some things. We talked about some of the impediments we have to selling that. So how do we get the community to unite and get on the bandwagon that says we need to do these things so that we have the kind of quality community that we can sell, that we can market for all of us up here and for the people who live here, because that's where the jobs are out there.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that you all would understand I'm incredibly bullish on this community. So there are difficulties, but the assets that we have, the energy, the determination, the drive, the population, the imagination, the vision, the creativity, the transportation is really, we have it all. And what we need is to bring some concertation and some leadership around what the key issues are and some continuing focus. And in the near term, candidly, we're going to be stressed with responding to the issue in Haiti. I think that's on everybody's mind in this community. If it isn't, it probably should be. And that might, in fact, help us to galvanize around who we are and what really matters as a community. So perhaps that catastrophe could be a way to bring us together around what the critical issues are for us going forward. So that's one. Two is that I think that there is a consensus about what it's going to take. My sense is in terms of coming back is that this community now more than ever understands who it is, and the edginess of the community has been replaced by a maturity and by a sense of a purpose that is different than what we had a couple of years ago. So I'm optimistic as a consequence.